Good afternoon, and welcome to First Service Solutions Mastermind Series webinar. I'm Steve Banegas, and I'm the COO and Chief People Officer for First Service Solutions. It is my privilege and honor today to co-host with Ann Hambly, who's on the panel, and help moderate today's webinar. If you've attended our webinars in the past, it'll have a little different feel to it today. It'll be something like what I call a rapid fire, if you will, rapid fire format. And basically, we've got three distinguished panels. Again, if you've attended our webinars in the past, our panelists are very familiar to you, and we'll have them identify themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves in just a second. But I'm going to ask them random questions in which they'll simply answer, and I think this format will be exciting and it'll be a little bit fast-paced. We hope you get a lot out of it. Without any further ado, Ann, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself? I know everybody knows who you are, but there might be a few who haven't attended our webinars who don't know who you are. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm the founder and I'm the CEO of First Service Solutions. And I have, I think in a nutshell, my background is all in servicing. So I've been in and run large servicing shops for my whole career, and that's where I approach what we do at First Service Solutions. And we help CMBS owners maneuver through the CMBS process for whatever you need. And I think you're going to find in the panel today, too, we got a lot of variety of backgrounds. So I guess you want Michael Carp to go next.
That'd be great.
Okay. Good afternoon, it's Michael Carp. 30 plus years in CMBS special servicing. Currently not in CMBS special servicing right now. I'm working bank special assets, but began my career in 1991 working through the RTC and worked through a couple of different organizations through about $20 billion of CMBS resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Gutierrez.
Hello, my name is Michael Gutierrez. It may be a familiar name to some of you who've been in CMBS for a while. I spent many years heading up global service evaluations for Standard & Poor's, where we rated a lot of CMBS master servicers and commercial servicers. In 2011, I recreated that business for Morningstar's credit rating agency, which has now been merged into Dominion Bond Rating Services.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you each for that. Both Michaels happen to be on our advisory board with First Service Solutions, so it's great to have them. It's good to see you guys. Okay, let's roll up our sleeves. Let's kick this off. Norman Vincent Peale used to say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. Again, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So with that mantra in mind, the first question I'd like for each of you to spend a minute or two answering. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has, for lack of a better term, infiltrated the entire world, I mean, every single human being in one form or another, every industry, and certainly CMBS has been impacted by CMBS. My question is simply this. Prior to CMBS, the servicers, the master and or the special, typically operated in a world of black and white, if you will, as the world of CMBS really mandated them to do. The question is, since CMBS, have the servicers somewhat migrated over to a paradigm of operating in a world of gray, meaning a little more flexible, a little more outside the norm, that type of thing? Ann, would you mind starting us off? What are your thoughts?
I think we all have different opinions on this, so it'd be kind of interesting. But I think actually I'm seeing a little bit more of the decisions made with a little bit of more of a gray filter. And what normally CMBS is very, very black and white, and there's rules, strict rule books, and strict things you have to do. And the reason I say it's gray right now is because all the decisions are based on projections and basically a little more information and understanding about what might happen in the future. And right now, nobody has that. So I'm finding that they're not only having to, kind of predict what might happen in the future on their own, but they have their own opinions about when the market might recover. So I find it to be a little more gray than ever in my lifetime, at least.
How about you, Michael Gutierrez? What are your thoughts?
I think servicers, special servicers, are having to think outside of the box more. I'll give you one example with COVID. There was recently litigation in May over a hotel operator that applied for PPP funding, and immediately a special servicer went to declare them in default because they violated the covenant of not taking additional debt after they received the CMBS loan. They quickly settled that, and my feeling is that as a public policy measure, they can't do that. They're going to have to waive that covenant to allow them to get PPP because it's a special public policy issue. So I think what I would suggest to any operators, any borrowers that are looking to get PPP loans, to contact your special servicer and make sure you can secure a waiver so you have smooth sailing when you do try to get those proceeds. One example.
Very good. Michael?
For better or for worse, I don't think CMBS has changed a whole lot in the last 10 years or 12 years. I think that, CMBS special servicers and master servicers and primary servicers operate in a very rigid environment. There's IRS rules that govern real estate mortgage investment conduits, which is the vehicle which holds the bonds. There are servicing agreements which have become more restrictive, not less restrictive over the years. So I'd say that it's pretty black and white for special servicers. There's really no reason to go outside the bounds of the REMIC rules or the servicing agreement to do things unless it may be mandated by public policy.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, riddle me this. Who ultimately makes the decision on a CMBS loan? Ann?
We can all answer it, probably the controlling class representative for the pool. No question, to me. Anybody have a different opinion?
No, I agree. The way it typically works is that there will be an asset manager who will get assigned a loan, and then they have to rig up a presentation to present to a committee with the best NPV analysis of all the different options. But ultimately, Ann's right, they have to make a recommendation to the controlling class as to which way to go, and they have the final say.
Interesting. Michael?
That's exactly right. A special servicer has the responsibility of managing a loan on behalf of the trust with the borrower. They're the front line for the borrower, but they're doing it in consultation with the controlling holder who's reviewed all their different options, lots of different strategies. But special servicer and the controlling holder are hopefully working together hand in hand to come up with a strategy they can present to the borrower.
Okay. Well, if we've determined that the CCR is ultimately the decision maker there, what is their business model?
Well, remember, the controlling holders, they're basically, for lack of a better term, high yield real estate investors. They're real estate private equity firms. They bought the most risky bonds in the trust. So they're the ones that are going to lose the most and the earliest. So it's kind of natural that the guys at the bottom of the capital stack would be able to make the decisions. So their business model is to buy bonds, make an above market yield, but they also have to price in losses. So in a time like now, there's going to be lots of losses against their investment. Hopefully they've held the investment for a few years. They've had a decent return on it, but it's a high yield investment for commercial real estate securities.
Yeah, I would think that their business model, I agree with Michael, but I think that their main interest is to maintain as much as possible their equity position in the capital stack. So they want to avoid as much as possible realizing losses which will cut into that equity. So they might be more inclined to follow solutions that put off realizing a loss, whether it's a restructure, a modification, a foreclosure, that will put off a realized loss as well. So.
Very good. Very good. Well, so is it safe to say that the CCCR or the controlling class representative, for all intent purposes, is a pretty significant player?
Yeah, they're a party to the deal, and they get to make decisions. It's called major decisions. And, it's not something that the borrower is aware of, but between the servicer and the trustee and the investor, they've negotiated a servicing agreement, which gives the controlling class investor the right to make decisions, major decisions.
And there's,
okay.
It's interesting, but there's like 10 maybe of them that control the bulk of the industry too. So it's not like it's a mass amount of bondholders. These are, sort of known entities.
Okay, well, with that in mind, can a borrower go directly to the CCCR? How do they even figure out who they are?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael, you want to?
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend it. It's not impossible to figure out, especially on new issue CMBS, who the controlling holder is. But the reality is that the borrower is charged with negotiating with the special servicer, who will in turn negotiate with the controlling holder for a resolution. So you can contact the controlling holder. I'm not sure you get much attention from them. And if you do, quite honestly, you may risk the relationship you have with the special servicing asset manager. It's just like work with the asset manager, work with that organization. That's probably the best way to approach it.
Not circumvent them.
I agree with Michael. I think the value that a firm like First Services does is they have data sources that can analyze a CMBS transaction. They can see how the capital stack is adding up. They can see the controlling class holder, how much equity they have. And that's going to determine in large part what the behavior of the special servicer is going to be. So in that sense, you do analyze the situation. Without contacting, I agree with Michael, it's not a good idea to go behind the back of the special servicer.
And it isn't really always easy to find. I mean, I've been in this business, since inception, and there are times where it's not easy to tell who that CCR is. So it's not something most borrowers would normally be able to find. They either inadvertently hear about it or something, but anyway, it's not easy. No.
I'm hearing special servicer and CCR quite a bit here. Is there a difference between a third party special servicers and ones that are affiliated with the CCR? If there are, what are the differences?
I think if you are, if you're a special servicer that's attached to an origination platform, and there are special servicers out there like that, you may get slightly better attention because the special servicer is sensitive to maintaining and preserving the borrower relationship. But the reality is that the special servicer is charged with collecting as much as possible. And the investor, as much as they'd like to say that they are affiliated with the originator, they want to reduce their losses. And so it's a loss mitigation tactic, but you may have slightly better, results with a special servicer attached to an origination platform.
Okay.
Some special servicers have affiliates that are VP sponsors, that are buyers of the lower tranches. And traditionally, there's always been a firewall there within the company, so there's no conflict of interest. A third-party servicer, though, would still have to be mindful of the controlling class. It still has to follow the controlling class instructions, whether they're affiliate or not. So I don't see that much difference in the outcome.
But I think the key thing, too, to add to this is, and I have this happen all the time. So you have a borrower that has two CMBS loans. They're in they could be in two different pools, same kind of property type, and same special servicer. So you would think, oh, well, I'm going to basically get the same thing with both loans. And if it's a third party special servicer and you've got two different controlling class representatives, we saw this a lot in the COVID relief, you get two very different outcomes. So that's where it matters a lot,
Okay.
I think that makes point. That's what's frustrating, I think, for the borrowers. It's hard to predict what the outcome is going to be. Some special servicers are controlling holders. They may be more inclined to do a discounted payoff, or there may be somebody who's more inclined to do a foreclosure. And the analysis, can generate very similar outcomes. And so it's hard to say that you violated the servicing standard by doing something that's not right in line with the net present value analysis. So I think it's frustrating I get the frustration for borrowers because you don't know what to expect from special servicers. And quite frankly, like you said, you could have, identical deals at a special servicer and the controlling holder may be making different analysis.
That's a good point, Michael. You kind of stole a thought that I had in my mind here. I'd still like for one of you to expand on it a little bit. Let's say you have borrower A and you have borrower B. Both own a hotel. Borrowers are kind of looking at this from a 30,000-foot level, right? And borrower A gets some type of relief and borrower B doesn't. Why does borrower B not get you know, from our owner's perspective, why aren't they getting the same type of relief?
Well, there are some differences. Like I was going to mention, it's very important from the get-go for borrowers to be open with the special services, provide any information, documentation that they request, because that's a problem if they don't get the information they need. Also, borrower structures may be different on different assets, right? You may have a family trust, an LLC. You may have organizational issues where different members of the trust don't agree with each other and actually block a good resolution. So every asset is kind of unique. You have to look at all those aspects besides just the property physically itself.
Another thing I have seen too through getting COVID relief with borrowers is you can say you got a borrower A and a borrower B, like you said, and they both seemingly have the same set of circumstances. You go to the special servicer, and what I'm hearing a lot from special servicers is there's basically what they're calling they don't call it this, I call it this 3-strike rule, right? But so if one borrower A happened to refinance his property a year ago and took a lot of cash out, whereas borrower B has a lot of money invested in the property and didn't just recently refinance, those could also be factors in their ultimate outcome. And just getting relief to a borrower when they just got, you know, 10 million out of a property is probably less palatable for a special than if someone has, you know, invested millions and millions over the years. So there's a lot of circumstances. It's the CCR, what their position is, as we said, what the borrower's cash position in the asset is, and so many factors. And we get this all the time where a borrower will come in and say, I was at a, you know, I don't know, a golf course with my friend, and I heard that they got a, you know, discounted payoff, and so I want one on mine, you know, and you have to walk through. It's like, it doesn't apply across the board, right? So.
Steve, you know, what's going to be interesting is we're not seeing it yet in 2.0 or 3.0, whatever we're calling it, but at some point in time, there's going to be a shift to control. And so the existing controlling holder will no longer be the decision maker. It will shift to the next class of investors. They get to a point, they can keep that special servicer, or they can appoint a new special servicer. And you could be marching down the road on a discounted payoff with the existing special servicer, transfer controlled transfers to another class of investor. That investor, you're basically starting all over, and it's going to be really frustrating when you figure out that controlling holder, that special servicer, has no interest in doing a discounted payoff with you at all. So again, it can happen. It can be it is the same asset, circumstances, just being viewed by under different lenses from different controlling holders and special servicers.
That's
very interesting. Go ahead, Michael.
That's a very good point. Even in rating agencies, I remember we were discussing that, the problem of not keeping consistency when there was a transfer of control, and the time wasted when a perfectly good resolution would be thrown out by the new class and requiring months of analysis again and the delay. That's a good point.
I wonder if we're going to start seeing transfers like we did in like 2010, you know, when losses kind of started coming through. Maybe 11 or 12 it was, I don't know, but we started seeing a lot of special servicing changes. I wonder if we will, just based on new appraisals recently, you know.
I think one thing that's a little bit different this time is that the controlling holders are buying, the wedge is thicker. So as opposed to just, and Mike Gutierrez can speak to this, you know, they were buying the unrated single Bs. Now they're maybe buying the unrated single Bs and some double Bs because of the loss retention piece of it. So you may have less quickly, or, you know, the change of control may not happen as quickly. It will happen eventually, but the way losses are running these days, it could surprise us.
Yeah.
Well, this goes back also to something that Michael had mentioned earlier. We were discussing that special services now have the ability, they always maybe did, to foreclose and hold and manage these properties for a longer time. Remember, the longer you hold these properties and manage them, you're pushing off loss realization. You don't realize the loss on foreclosure. You only realize it upon liquidation. So the losses hit these B pieces a lot later.
Well, Michael, with that thought there, what keeps a special servicer from foreclosing on an otherwise performing property that's just been affected by COVID-19?
Again, when I was at a rating agency, we looked at special services. Many of them really did not want to foreclose. It was a last resort. They didn't want to be a manager of property sitting there for who knows how long. There are expenses. Your property maintenance expenses, there's tax expenses, insurance expenses. Property managers have to be paid. So, the monies are going out to maintain a property. Now it may have changed. Now maybe they're more willing to hold properties longer, Michael?
Yeah. The IRS rules have changed, so a special servicer can hold the foreclosed collateral longer. I think we all believe this market's going to turn, and all these properties will at some point in time be worth what they were worth in January. And is that a year? Is that 2? Is that 3 years from now? But the special servicer has leverage. They can hold the asset. They may have to feed it for a while until it gets back to stabilization. But they can hold the property for quite a long time before they have to dispose of it. So it's an unfair advantage that the special servicers have, but nevertheless, it's out there.
Just to add, talking about the old days, REMIC rules, IRS rules limited the holding period to 2 years, unless you got a special accounting opinion to extend that. But apparently it's been loosened now, so they have more liberty to hold these properties for a longer period.
In the 08 downturn, I think it was one thing if they were going to foreclose, because in a lot of cases these were depressed assets with depressed values, and there were staring at, like Michael Carp said, big expenses and things to carry the asset. But nowadays, when you've got an asset that was otherwise, it could be 60% LTV, all was performing well, COVID hits, and here you are, right? And you're just asking for some kind of relief to get through COVID. I think the reason that maybe they're thinking twice before just foreclosing on things is these borrowers are making it clear they're not going to let them just foreclose. They'll file bankruptcy. They'll do other things to protect their assets. These are valuable assets to them. And I'm not saying ultimately the servicer wouldn't win in court on that, but it's going to be, there's a lot of expenses in trying to fight that versus working something out with the borrower. I'm hopeful, at least. That's a lot of their consideration.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? It sounds to me like, I'm going to pivot just for a second here. Again, we talk a lot about the special servicers and the CCR. It sounds to me like the special servicer really takes a lot of its cues or its direction from the CCR. Is that a fair statement or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that in mind, do the CCRs really wield a lot more power than the special servicers?
Well, the CCR can determine whether or not they can terminate a special servicer from the transaction. So they use a lot of power in that way, and they basically control the outcome for the special servicer. They'll take a recommendation, as we said, but they can reject the recommendation from the committee and decide to go a different direction. It didn't used to be that way, but BPs over the years, BPs buyers rather, have gotten a lot more power in these transactions than they used to have. But there's a whole history behind that. I'm not going to get into, but
Okay. And Michael Carp, would you concur with that, especially during this the COVID-19 pandemic?
Special servicers are mercenaries. Quite honestly, they're hired guns to go off and do what they do. I mean, they're experts in collections. They're experts in underwriting collateral. They're experts in evaluating distress situations. And special servicers are very capable and competent to do their job. So it's incumbent upon them to go out, underwrite the borrower, underwrite the collateral, underwrite the market, make a recommendation to the controlling holder. Controlling holder, can go a completely different direction. And assuming that what the controlling holder is asking the special servicer to do, the special servicer would generally follow that lead. When we were doing it, we worked hand in hand with the controlling holders. So we never went to them the day after our committee and said, we decided to foreclose on this collateral. We would have that conversation with them in the days and weeks before that, so we knew we're on the same page. But the controlling holders, are working hand in hand with the special servicers. But Mike is right. The special servicers are hired guns. And so if the controlling holder becomes disappointed with the special servicer, they can always replace them. I don't know how difficult that is these days. As long as the replacement special servicer is rated, and they can get a no downgrade letter. I think Mike can speak to this.
Right.
I don't know how hard it is these days to change special servicers. It used to be not that hard at all.
I still don't think it's hard. As Michael said, as long as you get another rated special servicer, so the agency will send a no downgrade letter, which means that the tranches in the transaction will not be, their ratings won't be affected by the replacement of the special servicer.
But at the end of the day, nobody likes to be fired, right? So I don't think the special services really want to get fired.
No.
But, but to your point though, Steve, the special servicer, if not working hand in hand with the controlling holder, could decide that the borrower's proposal is really way outside of the bounds. And so they're going to make a recommendation to foreclose. The controlling holder could just as soon say, you know what, we like the discounted payoff offer the borrower's proposed and go that direction. So it's not to say that one is right and one is wrong. The ultimate decision rests with the controlling holder. So the special servicer, I'm certain that in every situation, the special servicer has evaluated the options and the strategies, and they're going to make a recommendation to the controlling holder to recover the most amount of money. The controlling holder may be motivated differently for a variety of reasons to go a different direction, but generally, they're generally on the same page, I think. And I mean, I don't know what your experience. And,
No, I always say that. I mean, having been, of course, in servicing too, I think it's not in your best interest ever to go against, if someone can fire you, as you said, and you're still, your future and a lot of income. These aren't just it's not like a personal firing where you go get another job. This is a whole pool that you have a lot of money coming out of, right, over the next bunch of years. And these asset managers are people working for companies. So on top of that, you'd be risking your job with that special servicer, and you're putting yourself at high risk to go against what the CCR. And to Michael's point, Michael Carp, the reason these servicing standards all include language that says not using 20/20 hindsight or the benefit of 20/20 hindsight is one, I bet if all four of us today had to predict exactly what year a certain hotel's going to be performing pre-COVID again, we'd have four different slight opinions, and we'll not know which one of us is right until after it happens. And then you can say, oh, well, Michael Carp was more right. Well, okay, but you can't, so to some degree, they're trying to just predict what might happen. So anyway, I could go on.
It's awful. You get terminated for one of these, as my dad said, they have to bid for these assignments, and you have to ramp up in resources to take on so many deals. And ramping up an asset management shop, as Michael can attest, it's not cheap. Asset managers aren't cheap. It's a very expensive commodity.
Yeah.
And hard to come by, and they're high priced. So when you ramp up for that, you can't afford to lose one or two transactions because you're basing all your resourcing on those fees coming in.
I've got a question. I'm watching questions come in, and this goes right in line with what we're talking about. I'm not going to throw random questions in, but let me just ask this, and I can answer.
Yeah. Great.
Michael, you say if you've seen anything different, but someone's asking, have we ever seen special servicers going after defaulted properties solely as a real estate play rather than just as a lender foreclosing? The answer is yes, right? I mean, of course, that does happen.
It was easier. It was easier in earlier series of CMBS for the controlling holder or the special servicer to acquire the property from the trust. But today, the special servicer, I've always thought the special servicer shouldn't be the one buying the asset out of the trust. The controlling holder I think is probably better suited to do it. But there's a way to finesse that so that whatever the controlling holder offers, it could be $1 more than what the borrower offered. And the same thing happens in the real estate side. We have foreclosed collateral. You go to market, and the controlling holder has last look. And so it's discouraging for the marketplace. It's discouraging for other buyers, but it does happen.
When I was with the rating agencies, we always frowned upon special servicers doing that. We felt it wasn't their role. They weren't out there to be property investors. But we realized that it does happen.
Let's pivot for just a second. Let's talk about our current environment of COVID. Okay, and this question is really directed at you. Both Michaels, please jump in if you feel. like if you got something. And share with us, I know the answer to this question because I work closely with you. Since March, we have, as a company, we have onboarded 400, 450 new deals, clients, right? And what basic types of relief are we seeing get approved during this pandemic time?
Yeah, no, that is something we're right at the heart of. So there's really, I call it three types. One is the simple one, and all of you who've seen or who are my client have heard about this. Probably you could probably recite these words. But the first one is where you stay in master servicing. Remember, there's a master and a special servicer. We've been talking today about special. But when your loan is performing, you've not missed a payment, you're in master servicing, and you have sufficient money in reserves, you can sometimes get approval to use up to 3 months worth of payments from your reserve account. Stay in master servicing. So you're basically using you're borrowing from your reserves to make the payments, you pay that all back. That's simple first type. And in April, that seemed okay. So we thought, well, at the time, I couldn't imagine we'd be in this talking about COVID 90 days later. So it all seemed okay.
Right.
And then we got a little further down the road and realized, okay, that's not long enough for many, many properties. So the second type of COVID relief is one where you have to get to special servicing. And so once you're in special servicing, it's another form of kind of kicking the can down the road, deferring payments, 6, 7, 8, 9 months payments, kicking the can down the road. You got to repay them eventually, and there's all kinds of parameters around that.
And real quick, are there higher fees with that being transferred?
Yes.
Typically?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the first type is a $10,000 or $20,000 fee. It's compared to these assets, it's pretty minor. Type 2 here, the type I was just talking about, where you get to special servicing, there are fees involved, and it's a little higher, definitely higher than that. And the third type is take a hotel. I got plenty where hotel was closed down March 11th, and in some cases still not open. So 3-month relief wouldn't have helped. 6 months deferral doesn't help much. And how am I going to start paying it back in 2021? I mean, I'm barely going to be starting to recover in 21 or 22. So those are where you need a longer term, multi-year kind of modification of your debt. That's what we're working on right now. Those are the most predominant. I think almost all hotels have those going on right now. Those require a modification fee, typically 1%. And 2 questions I've had that are all right here are what triggers an appraisal event. We're talking about CCRs changing and stuff. Mm-hmm. And the minute a loan, well, not the minute, but within 90 days, I think, of transferring a loan to special servicer, the special servicer will order an appraisal. They have to. So a trigger event is going to special servicing. So just to answer that question. So those are the 3 types.
Hey, Ann, what's the longest deferment period you're seeing? Are they coming in 60-day increments, 90-day increments? Is anybody doing 6 months right out of the box?
Yeah, the type 2 is, we're getting through year end, I'd say, on a lot of them. So sometimes that's 7 months, almost always kind of through October, November, December. And now the modifications we're seeing, the special servicers are willing to look out through maybe 2021. They're not so interested in saying, yeah, in 24, I bet you're still going to be suffering. They're kind of drawing the line, I'm finding, at about year end 2021. But yeah.
For the most serious, are you seeing any note restructurings, A-B structures and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. What we're seeing now is this looks to me a lot like 08, 9, 10, 11, like the 08 downturn, only bigger and more and deeper. But the weird part is they're not pre-COVID. They aren't necessarily non-performing distressed deals. So the appraisals in some cases will come in and show equity. And that's why this is such a huge issue, is what are the servicers' mindset? Back to Steve's original question, can it be in a gray area? But if you normally... In 08, if as a special servicer, if you had a loan come to you that was 60% LTV and the borrower was in default, you'd grab that asset and run, right? I mean, you would never think twice about it. That would be one you'd love to have. Here, we have to pray on, PREY and PRAY, maybe. We have to pray that there's a little bit more reasonability here. We all know it's a short-term, unforeseen issue, and we just need to get out of it, and hopefully we can all work along together.
What's here from 2008 is that the COVID is changing consumer patterns of behavior, and we don't know how long it's going to last. So
Yes.
long before people stop being afraid of going to a hotel or stop being afraid of going to a shopping mall if that ever happens again. So it's out. Nobody really is sure of when that's going to turn around.
So that's the gray, right?
It's not
That's
just
great. It's so unknown. Everything's so unknown. Right?
Right.
And are you beginning to see appraisals on collateral that had the COVID effect in it?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I'd say no is the answer really to the question. I guess the key is how can you factor in the COVID factor, right? I don't know. But the appraisals are not coming in showing distress. So the appraisals are coming in, I think, looking back a little bit and factoring in what things were like pre-COVID. And most of the ones I'm looking at are hotels. So in fairness, they're not retail where we have a bigger horizon issue probably. This is just a short-term issue,
Our bank appraisals are coming back with longer periods to stabilize, higher costs to stabilize, expecting there to be some reduced occupancy before it begins to turn around. So we're seeing it in a number of different ways factored into appraisals. The appraisals are coming in with a COVID impact for sure, and coming in a number of different ways.
That's actually good to hear because that's key to getting things done, right? And CMBS too.
I especially with regard to office. I mean, how are they going to value that? Office, when it starts coming back, a lot of people are working remotely. You also have to retrofit those office spaces. Health regulations aren't going to allow you to have these wide open spaces with open desks. So you're going to have to reconfigure cubicles or whatever. That means you're going to have to spend money. Or if you try to get new tenants, serious PI, to new tenants to do that. So I think it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Michael, Ann and I were sitting in on a webinar earlier this week where they talked about office space. And what I gleaned from that was, of all the property types, office space is really the real unknown because there's so many different habits that affect office space. On the left hand, you have a lot of leaders feel like remote is very valuable and very productive and is going to be the way of the future. And then on the right, you have folks thinking, well, it's not as productive, and there's those intangibles that you're missing. So office space could continue to grow or at least stay the same. What are y'all's thoughts?
If I was a betting man, I'd buy shares of Herman Miller's. I think cubicles are coming back from the 90s.
You heard it here, folks.
People that have gone to open space are going to have to spread people out. So if people aren't coming back to the office, there are people who are going back to the office which need more space. So you can't put 26 people in a small area. So people are going to be forced to expand. They're going to be forced to adopt new. It could be hoteling. It could be different things. But there will be people who work from home more. But the people who do go back to the office will need more space.
Yep.
Actually, First Service Solutions is doing just that. We're acquiring a little bit more space so that we can spread out a little bit more. Good point. And what are your thoughts?
No, I don't disagree with anything anyone said. Yeah, nothing to add.
I want to go back for 1 second to the appraisal discussion because Ann said something at the very end, which lower appraisals. It's good that the COVID impact is being reflected there. It may help with the borrower's argument, but in bankruptcy, it also has it has the opposite effect on the borrower. So if the lender is able to prove there's no equity there, and that, again, it may be a temporary impairment. We don't think it's a permanent impairment, but if you look at an appraisal today and it's got a reduced value because they've factored in something from COVID, then that's going to hurt the borrower. I mean, it helps bolster their case, but on the other hand, it could hurt them also.
True, double-edged sword.
Top 3 property types affected by COVID in a negative way. Real quick, random fire. Top 3
Hotels.
property types.
Hotels.
Hotels, retail, office.
Maybe student housing, but I don't know about top 3. I think it's hotels. And then after those top 3, it's retail, personally.
Surprisingly, multifamily hasn't been hurt as bad. I thought that a lot of people would be holding back on paying rent, but rent payments have been much higher than expected.
Yeah.
They haven't been.
Absolutely. That's true. Michael Carp, thoughts?
Movie theaters. I mean, retail's a problem. Movie theaters are a major problem. And if you have a movie theater in your shopping center, I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm going back to the movie theater, and you can't make it up on popcorn. So if you go to 50% occupancy on a theater, I don't know what you do. And there's no movies coming out. That's the other issue. There's a shortage of first-run movies being released by the studio. So it's a combination of 3 or 4 different things that I think will really hurt the theater business.
Don't get Steve going on that. Steve, let's ask another question.
Oh, how funny. Inside joke there. Okay. Are there any property types that haven't been impacted by COVID that may be doing better?
Industrial.
Yeah.
Industrial?
And what do they call it now? The life science or, health? I mean, I don't know. It's called life science or something. What's that new property type that people are calling? It's the merging of science and health. Forget what it's called. Sorry.
You mean medical buildings?
No. There's some new term that I've heard used now a few times that I hadn't heard before, and that it's kind of like the merging of science and health, like bio. So I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, I don't think some of these regional malls or even super regionals are going to make a comeback. These things, they might be obsolete. I mean, I read reports that Simon is already looking to negotiate to turn 1 or 2 of their mall properties into super warehouse sites for Amazon because they have so many dark stores that they can't replace.
Okay.
I would say, industrial has held up the best, but at some point in time, we'll overbuild that too. So, that just, today it's in favor. At some point in time, because they're building it as fast as they possibly can, there's no way that we can consume all that's being built and all that's on the drawing board.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm going to call this next question a throw it up for grabs question. The first panelist to answer it wins the panelist of the day. Okay. It's two-folded, if you will. What can a borrower expect and what can they do when the property is seriously affected by COVID-19? What can they expect? What can they do if their property is affected by this pandemic?
What they should do is they should be transparent. They should be as honest as possible with the special servicer. Give them all the information they can as quickly as they can. The special servicers are busy. They're overwhelmed. And, they're going to get to your credit eventually. They may get to it faster if you're giving them all the information they need. So if you spoon feed them good information and you're transparent with them, I think that goes a long, long way.
I got to add, Steve, this is just so important. In fact, behind you, I don't know if everybody can see behind Steve, it did fell, but now it's all slanted perfectly. But that's the cover. The CMBS 911 is a book that I wrote recently, a couple of months ago. I would encourage you all to go to cmbs911.com and buy it. This is not meant to be a commercial. My point is that I paralleled what happens when you're in a in a car accident. It fell again. Anyway, it's a better book than the poster there. But it's
technical difficulties.
If you had a car accident, you had to call 911, you get taken by ambulance to the hospital and you get laid on a table and you get examined. I parallel that. Thank you, Michael. Look at that. Love it. Michael Carp, where's yours? No. Anyway.
That's over there.
Yeah, thank you. But I parallel that with the experience of getting transferred to special servicing and what that feels like. And that's my, and with all seriousness, that's the point I'm making is what Michael's describing earlier about what you'll feel and what you should do when you get to special. I go through that a lot in the book, and it will feel intrusive, and it isn't pleasant. But that's the only way to get help if you've had a serious event, and COVID is a serious event. So anyway, just wanted to throw that out there.
I want to echo what Michael said as well. It's very important that the borrower be very realistic about the situation with the property. You can't be in denial. I mean, you have to be open with your special servicer. And if you hire a firm like First Service Solutions, you have to be open with them. It's like hiring an accountant. You have problems with the IRS. You got to be very open with the accountant is what you're up to, what your problem is. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. So, I mean, it could be painful, but it's got to be a come to Jesus moment,
Yeah. And something else I'll add to that is that even, if you engage counsel, if you've engaged First Service Solutions, stay involved, because the special servicer is going to want to know that a borrower representative, somebody from the borrower shop, is involved in this. The special servicer asset manager doesn't want to speak to a lawyer, doesn't want to speak to Ann every day. They want to know the borrower is vested in this deal. And I think that, just cooperate. It may backfire on you, but more times than not, being open and transparent will actually win the day. And again, being prepared going in, you just want to get to the top of the stack. You want to get more attention sooner as opposed to being, set aside and disregarded.
And probably the most important thing I think is know who you're negotiating with and what their motives are. If no matter anywhere, that's 101 negotiation. If I'm negotiating with someone, I have to understand what their motivation is, what does it for them, who they are, right? And that's the key with CMBS. So if you don't know who your ultimate decision maker is and what their motivations are and the inside of that, then you're going to be ill-equipped too.
Yeah. I think it's hard for borrowers. Let's the borrowers have an inside track, either through their lawyer or through you, Ann. The borrower's not going to know who's the controlling holder behind the special servicer. And for the borrower, for better or for worse, it's kind of luck of the draw. Your loan gets assigned to an asset manager, and hopefully that asset manager knows your product type, is familiar with your market, and has experience working out these kinds of problems, knowing what the options are. Because if you're unfortunate enough to get somebody who's either very, very junior or doesn't understand hotels, then that could be a bad place. But it's going to be hard for the borrower to assess really who they're negotiating with as to the controlling holder. The asset manager, they may be able to become familiar with them and know their style, but I think it's going to be hard to read the controlling holder's motivation through the asset manager. Eventually you will, because you'll make a couple of different proposals. They'll come back to you with some suggestions. You'll kind of get a feel for what they're willing to do, but that may take some dancing to get to that point.
And again, I can't stress enough, being open with the special servicer, providing all the information they require in a timely manner. An asset manager, you're very frustrated trying to get simple information like financial statements or whatever, and nothing comes and nothing comes. That's going to negatively impact how they handle your loan.
Absolutely. There are a lot of moving parts when dealing with a special servicer. When dealing with CMBS, there's a lot of moving parts. So one last question. It's more of a holistic question, if I may. I'd like each of you to take a little bit of some thought to it, if you would. What should we not underestimate out there for the remainder of 2020? What should we not underestimate out there for the remainder of the year?
Well, I mean, there will continue to be assets transferred to the special servicer. The special servicer is going to take on more volume. They're going to get busier. Kind of goes to the point of being prepared, being concise, having a plan, delivering the information. So the special servicers aren't going to get less busy between now and year end. They're going to stay as busy as they are now, and things will actually ramp up as the deferments begin to burn off. So it's going to be a very busy time for special servicers. The borrowers are anxious to get an answer, get some resolution, but it takes some time. And I think borrowers need to be prepared they need to know it's not going to take a week or two. It's going to take a month or two or longer, because
Thank
They're
you.
going to order third-party reports like appraisals. They may order property condition assessments. So, allow some runway. Don't think that you're going to take care of your problem in, 2 or 3 weeks, because it's going to take a long time.
Great point. Great
Yeah,
point.
we also shouldn't underestimate how slow it may be in certain areas of the country to get out of these really restrictive COVID rules. I mean, some municipalities are still demanding 25% only occupancy.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
you can't survive economically doing that. So if you're a borrower at a restaurant in, say, New York City, you're going to have a tough time trying to survive. So we have to really factor in, and it varies by area, by state, by city, how they're reacting. Some are opening much quicker, some are much slower.
I think is we can't underestimate how much things will have changed because of COVID. I think we sometimes tend to think, I've heard people talk about, is it a U shape or a V shape? I'm not sure that's applicable here, because I'm not sure that I think we started out we talked about this at various points in today's session, but we're not going to go right back to the minute they open a mall or open a movie theater. We don't all rush right back and go in there. We don't necessarily hop on the plane and go, to a big crowded convention center again right away. I just think things are changed probably permanently to some degree. Not that we'll always be like depressed, but I think things will be different. And I think that's what I think we shouldn't underestimate. There's no such thing as like, oh, a vaccine gets rolled out tomorrow, everything will be back to normal. It'll just be like pre-COVID. I just don't think that, personally.
No, I agree with you. I think people started getting used to buying things online. Maybe they don't go back to the retail face-to-face anymore because they've gotten accustomed to doing things online. Same thing with grocery shopping. Maybe they'll buy groceries, online, not having to go to the grocery store anymore. So that's going to affect strip centers. It's going to affect a lot of properties.
Well, look at these kind of calls and meetings. There was a time where we would all fly somewhere, stay at a hotel the night before, leave out certain parts, and then, but sit at a panel and talk to people in the audience. And you don't have to do that now. Now, I would have been resistant to that a year ago. I would have thought, oh no, you still have to have those. But we realized, you know what, you can be somewhat effective, if not just as much, we're only taking an hour out of people's day this way, and So anyway.
Yeah.
I'm gonna violate moderator rule 101. I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in on that very question, if I may. I may be the only person on the planet that feels this way. I think post-COVID, I think we are such a society that is used to instant gratification. I mean, you've got a cell phone in your hand that you literally can have the entire Library of Congress at the palm of your hand. Instant information, instant gratification. We are very, very much used to going out and having a good meal, socializing, that type of thing. I think one of you mentioned that every state is a little differently. Every state's restrictions are a little differently. I would venture to say, Michael Gutierrez, if you flew down here to Texas, you would think that there was no COVID compared to New York, simply because you can go to a restaurant and they say 50%. I don't even know. To be quite honest with you, I'm not even sure if it's 25 or 50%. There's a lot of people there. Ann kind of laughed about the movie piece there. You're looking at probably one of 10 people in the country who went to a movie this past weekend. And, I had my popcorn and I enjoyed a good movie. But to be quite honest with you, the movie theater was pretty empty. But it's a movie theater that had 10 screens in it, and there's probably 100 people in the entire building. My point is I think we've been locked up for so long. I think we are going to have to adapt a little bit. But I think if it's left up to the people, and we're allowed to make our own decisions, I think we'll gather sooner. I think we'll spend sooner. So for whatever that's worth, I might be the only guy in the world that thinks that. So
You're the only one I know that went to a movie theater, though. But anyway.
Yeah. Brave man.
Yeah.
man, well, our time is quickly wrapping up here. My thunder was a little bit stolen here on CMBS 911. If you haven't had the opportunity to buy your book, please go to cmbs911.com. It's a great read. Ann did a fabulous job writing this book. There's a lot of people who've read it and they really get a lot out of it. So, in closing, I'd like to share a quick little poem with you, if I may. I saw them tearing a building down, a gang of men in a busy town. With a ho-heave-ho and a lusty yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. I asked the foreman, are these men skilled? The men you'd use if you had to build. He gave a laugh and said, no, indeed, just common labor is all I need. I can easily wreck in a day or two what has taken builders years to do.
Oh.
So I thought to myself as I went my way, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I the builder who works with care, measuring life by the rule and square? Am I shaping my deeds to a well-made plan, patiently doing the best that I can? Well, here's a good thing to remember and a fine thing to do. Always join the construction gang, not the wrecking crew. I know we're all in this to better our communities. We're all in this to better our business. We're all in this to better our families. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll talk soon. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for attending.
Okay.
Thank you.